Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Lori and I are here today. We are going to have a discussion about alimony. But before I get into that and introduce Lori, my name is Robin Depius. I am the owner and the CEO of Confidence and Clarity. This group is made specifically for women going through divorce, contemplating divorce, or even after that divorce, you're separated. How do you get out? What do you need to do? If you're scared or can't afford it, there are resources out there. Use this group. That's what it's for. Laws are different in every state. So we cannot give legal advice. I'm going to make sure I say that right up front, right? But we can talk about generalities about your state, generalities about the nation, possibly your state, different things about what is going on, how you can prepare strategically and financially to leave, to divorce, to get out, to be you again. So today I am so thrilled again to have Lori Barkus with us. She's a family attorney in license in Colorado and Florida. And so she is here today, and we're going to have a discussion about alimony, do's, don'ts, and things that you can prepare for alimony, or I don't know, everything alimony. So Lori Barkus, introduce yourself, and then let's start talking about alimony.
Absolutely. And Robin, it's always a pleasure to be here. But today I'm super excited because this is such an important topic. Lori Barkus, I am the founder and owner of Sustainable Family Solutions. We are a women-led and mostly women-focused family law firm operating in South Florida and in Colorado. And I have worked in the family law field for over 20 years, coming up on 25. But as Robin said, this is not legal advice. We're gonna talk generally here, and the laws of states vary, especially with divorce. Divorce is a state-by-state thing. There's some things that are more or less true. Some things may or may not apply. So it's always important that you speak to an attorney in your local area about your specific situation. So with that, I'm going to dive in. Alimony, or maintenance as it's sometimes called in some states, is a big component of divorce. Because on the financial side, we have dividing of the assets, which I think we've talked about before, or probably we'll talk about at some point. And then we have support, spousal support. And one of the things people don't always understand is this is gender neutral. This isn't women receive alimony from men. They can, but again, it has to do with who earns more than the other person. And does the other person need support? Not so much from the perspective of the other party in the divorce, because I represent a lot of women who are breadwinners, business owners, and they feel very strongly that the spouse does not need alimony or maintenance. And they have some very compelling arguments about that, but the court may not agree. And by the same token, there are a lot of men who feel that their wives should not get alimony or maintenance, but the court is going to look at it differently than you will. And something to keep in mind in that process, because some states' laws are more rigid than others. And again, you don't want to make the mistake of thinking, well, there's no way I would pay alimony because I believe the other person can be self-supported. That may or may not be the case. And by the same token, if you are the stay-at-home parent, the stay-at-home mom, which we see a lot, your spouse might tell you, oh, you're not going to get any alimony because, well, you're the one leaving, or for this or that or any other reason. And we've talked a lot about how sometimes the person in that position who's more financially insecure is being fed things by their spouse. That's you can look at our past podcasts. We've discussed that a lot. It's not something I would rely on. If you've stayed at home for a period of years, perhaps the entire marriage, you haven't worked, you don't have work history, chances are there's some sort of alimony component to your divorce. and you want to look into that. And there's kind of two big concepts of alimony that people really want to know about, and that's how much and how long. And some states like Colorado have a formula approach to maintenance, as we call it here, where there are guidelines that look at the income of one party, the income of the other party, and do a calculation. Other states, like Florida, that likes to have people go to court as much as possible, don't have any standards for alimony. They have something called need and ability to pay, which is as vague as it sounds. And so that can be a little murkier, but it's important to understand, and this gets back to what we always tell people of needing to understand the numbers. You can't get more than the other person has. I mean, that may sound strange, but I have seen people actually ask for that, and it doesn't exist. It's not there. And understanding what your spouse makes is very, very important, because sometimes that can be easy. Somebody has a job, they get a paycheck every other week or twice a month. They get tax forms at the end of the year. But we have a lot of business owners where things are a little bit trickier and it's not as clear and not as understood. And then there's other people who have high level positions where they're paid in different ways and they're given reimbursements for certain things, and they may have different perks from their company. So not as simple as just putting a number in a formula for some people.
Is there a certain percentage that, I'll just call it the higher wage earner, should keep, or for living expenses? Is there like a bottom in any of these states? Like they I don't know, they cannot give more than 1/3 of their paycheck or income or something like that?
I can't speak to all states. Florida says that the person paying can't be left with less money than the person receiving. Colorado's formula, I believe, caps it at 40%, but that's the high end. Because one of the things people forget, and I see lawyers do this too, it kind of makes me nuts. They take a total number and they say, well, this person makes $10,000 a month, so my client should get $5,000 a month. And frankly, if an attorney tells you that, well, anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But basically, you don't want to look at it that way, because remember, there are those people at the IRS, your taxes, and not just the IRS, but maybe your state taxes as well. So you're never going to take the number and divide it in half. You're going to have to account for that. It's usually somewhere around, I would say, about 33 to 38%. I've heard that figure used, but keep in mind, that's if one person is making zero. And I mean, let's say we have a stay-at-home parent who doesn't have any income. Their starting out point may or may not be zero. And if it is zero, the total amount would be probably somewhere around 1/3 of that income. But oh, sorry, Robin.
Well, and it doesn't it also, so we have alimony and child support, and that is always, or I should say most of the time, it's figured different, right? Because, okay. So we cannot combine or think of it as one dollar amount, because it really is two separate things.
It generally is. And again, I can only speak to the states that I practice in, but I do believe most states do it that way. Sometimes in settlement, people will come up with a lump sum number, but the way I've seen the courts do it in Colorado and Florida, where I practice, is that you figure out the alimony or maintenance, and then you figure out the child support, because the alimony is to some extent considered income to the person receiving it. So they should be treated differently. And also, alimony maintenance can be waived. Child support generally cannot, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that on another day.
Okay. So now with alimony, we kind of talked about how much, but how long? How do you even figure that?
Well, that one gets interesting because there's a very small number of states, Florida included, that believe in a concept called permanent alimony, which really means it's an indefinite number of time, an indefinite period of time, because it's neither realistic nor logical in almost every situation that anybody could pay alimony forever. But it
What
just
I
doesn't.
was thinking, like, oh my gosh.
Right. Well, anywhere outside of the state of Florida, people do understand that the concept, it's not workable. But Florida, and I think a very small other number of states are holding on to a concept that doesn't really serve people. Because when we start getting into alternatives and things like that, we'll talk about that more. And that concept will make even less sense. But what a lot of states do is they have different types of alimony that are usually for some duration. And Colorado does have an indefinite alimony maintenance officially, but it's not used very much because it's just, it's not the most logical situation, because again, at some point this is going to end. A good rule of thumb would be somewhere around half the length of a marriage in marriages that are I would say of a medium length. And again, this is across the board. You might be looking at this and saying, I'm in Texas and that would never happen. That might be true. Or I'm in Nebraska. I don't know any of those laws. I'm talking generalities, but something like that is something you think about. And amount and duration kind of come into play if you're negotiating, which you will be at some point, whether you're successful or not. Because the longer you receive alimony, chances are it's going to be a lower number, as opposed to a higher amount. Courts generally won't reduce it. I mean, again, from what I've seen in Colorado and Florida, if you're getting $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month or $500 a month, that's the amount. And then the court will set a duration, which generally, if a judge does it, it's always modifiable based on certain circumstances. But, and I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
Nope, you did. It's all a maybe. So let's say the court says that somebody has to pay this alimony. Do they pay it directly to the other spouse? Does it have to go through the courts? And what if they just don't pay?
Mm-hmm. Which unfortunately does happen. Generally, and again, in the states that I practice in, courts generally make those payments go through a court registry so that they can keep track. And that way there's no question about whether somebody paid or not, at least in theory, if the registry is keeping accurate records. But in any event, if a person doesn't pay, well, if you just, you're not supposed to just stop paying because you're presumed capable of paying. If you don't pay, generally, that means that you're in violation of a court order. And there are enforcement mechanisms and remedies for that, involving going into court and saying, I have a court order, I'm supposed to be paid, I wasn't paid. And there may or may not be attorney's fees awarded in that. In a lot of states, if somebody just stops paying and violates a court order, you should be awarded attorney's fees. But the reason I'm hesitating is the question is why and what's going on. And if somebody stops paying and they have the money in the bank account, for example, you've got somebody who's paying $5,000 a month and they've got a bank, they're full-time employed, they haven't lost their job, they've got $50,000 in the bank account, you're getting your money and you're getting attorney's fees. Or chances are, I mean, that person might find themselves going to jail. But a lot of times somebody stops paying because they can't, or at least they're representing that they can't. And then it becomes a challenge because they are in violation of a court order, but a judge can't make you pay something if you don't have
job, it. Yeah, if you don't have it,
Mm-hmm.
you lose your job, something happens.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, and I do know that if they are in arrears, if they do their tax return and if you do yours, you could get their tax refund.
Right.
Right.
If you have a court to get the order, in most states you do, you go to court and you say, I have this order, I'm supposed to be paid, I wasn't paid, I'm X amount behind, and there might be a minimum threshold for that. Again, I'm not really sure. But then once you have that, then you can seek those remedies. It's not an automatic, is what I'm saying. And I don't know the specific state by state steps.
Yeah, I think there's something that you have to do. And then it gets more complicated if you're both in different states, right?
That is true. Am I frozen?
You are frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay. It does. Different states have different ways of different remedies and different procedures. That is something to be aware of. And again, that's something that you want to talk to an attorney about. But you also want to know what's going on. I mean, in some cases, people are, if you stop hearing me, let me know. And I'll try to bounce out. In some cases, people are on speaking terms with ex-spouses. And if something's going on and that person reaches out to you, then, so much better to try to figure that out. Because when people start getting behind and it's due to some unfortunate circumstance, which happens in a down economy. It happens a lot as people get older. Sometimes they get laid off and they don't have another job. So sometimes it's better to know what's going on so you can seek some sort of relief. And
yeah, because that is a sticky situation there. Why are they stopping payment, or why isn't it coming through? And can you even talk to them about it without, incurring legal fees, right? Or the court system and the time and the energy that all goes into.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that may be what you need to do. Because again, sometimes people just make an agreement and then it gets really complicated. Well, we had this agreement and we talked about it and this was supposed to happen. And then generally court orders don't change unless you change them by actually going to court. So again, good thing to talk to an attorney in your local area about, but be aware that there's other alternatives. And sometimes just running into court may not be the right move. There might be a better way to deal with it if this person is in a bad financial state. And it might also be a medical issue. I've seen that happen too. And now this person can't work and they've had this diagnosis and you're going to end up spending, you could potentially spend money to try to collect that you can't get back. And I've seen people do that, and it is most unfortunate.
Yeah, I didn't think about the medical, but that is, and I'm sure that really has happened in the last 3 years during the pandemic, and the downturn of the economy. So that we kind of talked about the alimony and payments of alimony, but what are some alternatives that maybe we don't get paid the alimony? Is there another way that you can capture assets and not pay the alimony?
That's a great question, Robin. There are different options that can sometimes work, in that a person can perhaps receive a greater share of assets or what's called a lump sum. And again, these are very, very specific. This is something that you definitely want to talk to a financial professional about, because you want to make sure the numbers add up. And not all dollars are equal when it comes to retirement dollars or actual cash on hand. But in some situations, I personally like it if it can be available because of what we're talking about. So many things can happen in life, and even unintentional things of somebody who has the best of intentions to follow a court order and means to pay it, but something happens and they get behind and they can't pay. And That's a lot of uncertainty. And then there are people who really don't intend to pay or will make it as difficult as possible. And this will prolong contact between two people that might be better off not being in contact. And especially in a situation where there are no minor children and everybody's looking to make a break and move on. Those are simpler situations to resolve it, because those are usually shorter situations. Long-term situations, it may be hard to do, but it is something to think about and at least put on the table, because even if your state has permanent alimony, it's not something that will solve all of your financial problems for life. At least it's not guaranteed. And I fear that a lot of attorneys try to sell it that way, but I don't think it's the case, because I do a lot of alimony modifications in Florida where somebody's older, they're in their 70s, 80s even, and they can't work anymore. And the other side seems shocked that this is happening. And that just, yeah, it's amazing to me and unfortunate. So
always try and go through the court system so that it's recorded. Make sure you keep good records of what you're getting or what you're paying. And then try not really make that personal agreement between you and the ex that I'm just going to pay you directly, because there's not a lot of recourse. That's kind of what I was talking about, Lori. So it's that part, and or if your alimony adds up to that $100,000, is there another way that you can get that in property or a cash account or some other way? Yep.
Right. Those are all excellent. The only thing I would add is it's great if you can work something out. I mean, back to that sudden unemployment situation, but reduce it to writing, file it in your case, make it a court order. Then there's no question about it. That, that either that things were waived or they weren't. I mean, it might be okay, I agree, you don't have to pay me for the next 2 months, or you pay me half, or just throwing out ideas depending on people's situations. But, what's going to happen with the rest of it? You'll pay me back when you get a job. Am I waiving it? Am I saying you'll pay me? What are we doing? And if you're able to have those conversations, so much the better for both of you, because you could save a ton of money in lawyer fees in a situation where there might not be anything better you can do in the immediate. And so that's just something to think about.
And make sure that whatever is in that decree, it's very clear and it doesn't contradict with something else in that decree.
Right. No, that's an excellent point. I mean, I wouldn't write the agreement up yourselves and file it thinking, oh, we're going to save money. That rarely works well. Again, great situation to bring in a lawyer to help you draft and help you file. Because I've seen a lot of agreements that people write themselves that get them into trouble that costs them far more than it would to have something drafted.
Yeah, I've read a bunch of them too, and there's things that contradict in it. It's like, no. You write down exactly what you want, what you've agreed on, take it to a lawyer. Yes, pay the lawyer to draft and talk to you about any inconsistencies in that, right?
I agree. That is not a situation where you want to do it yourself. I know everybody wants answers on YouTube and Google and all those things. Not a good idea. I've seen people spend a lot more money because they wrote something and they thought it was clear and it wasn't. And so, yeah, just simply worth it to spend a couple dollars on and get it done right, because this is your life and your future, and these payments are important. They really are. If you're receiving these payments, you very well may be relying on them, and it's also important that you get this. It's part of what is owed to you from your divorce.
Yep. Now, and I'm on Facebook now, and BB has a question here or a statement. It says, even if the marriage and divorce process was done in one state and the spouses go to other states later, doesn't the original state laws where the divorce and alimony was established are predominant. So how does that work, right? Let's say they both lived in, I'm just going to say Wisconsin, or let's say Colorado, because we're in Colorado here. And then they get divorced, all of the laws, right? But then they both move to different states. What happens?
In that situation, generally, and state laws may vary, but I think there's probably a lot of consistency on this. They would probably, any case would have to be back in that original state, and yes, that state laws would apply. And if for some reason they both moved to a different state together, and they decided they both moved to Colorado because hey, it's great out here, and they want to move their case to Colorado, I do believe the original state's laws would apply, but that does get really, really complicated.
Okay, and that's a good point. So sometimes you can move it to the state you're in, right?
If you're both there, if you're
both
yeah,
there, okay.
Generally, child support's different, but we're not talking about that today. If it's alimony, let's say people get divorced in Wisconsin, and then one moves to Colorado and one moves to Florida, you would probably you'd either have to agree, and why would you? I mean, if you live in Florida, you're not going to agree to Colorado and vice versa. So in that situation, you would probably be back in a Wisconsin court, although in these days, probably by Zoom.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to say that is one good thing that's happened the last 3 years is the court system is now using Zoom more. Oh my God. It's like, thank God. Yeah. Yeah. For all sections of law, right? For the divorce, for guardianship, for all of it. At least that's what I've been hearing. Yeah.
Yes. It has gotten better. And that is a good thing. I mean, and because I think it allows people greater access to court, especially if you moved out of state and you're worried about your alimony, you don't want to have to fly to a state that you don't live in, where maybe you don't even have family or place to stay anymore and spend even more money. So if you can do that virtually, that will definitely help out in that equation.
Okay, so I'm just checking to see if there's any other, I know Mary is on with us. So Mary, if you have a question, if you want to put it into the chat, we will definitely see if we can answer your question, or just talk to us, because I think you're off mute.
I don't have any specific questions. I'm all new to this, and we haven't our first court is next Monday, April 3rd, and it's for temporary assistance. So I don't know.
So
Okay.
Lori, can you tell Mary a little bit about what to prepare then and plan for that first court date?
I very, very generally, I mean, again, I would have to say that we don't want to talk about anything on a live stream that could be confidential. We want to protect Mary's privacy in her case.
Yep.
And we also don't want to make sure we don't say anything that's against her state rules, because I don't know them. But generally in any kind of a temporary proceeding, you need to think about what orders you need in place right now. A lot of times that's who's going to pay the bills, what's going to happen with kids. If there are kids, who are they going to live with? Who's going to pay child support? Who's going to pay their expenses? Where are we both going to live? Is there anything else that needs to be decided right this minute? And again, that really has to be a narrower focus. There's a lot of things that people want to know about. It's not fun to be in limbo, but generally temporary hearings are short. So there isn't a ton of time. And so while there might be things, I mean, I have some clients who want to divide up the whole house, and they want to know all that, and they want to know what's going to happen with things that can really wait down the road. I would really zero in on what needs to be done now, what needs to be done for the next few months to make sure that the kids are okay, if there are kids, the adults are okay, and that bills don't get behind. I would focus on those things.
So really it is, you got to sit down and think, what is happening now? What bills need to be paid? and what, right? It's all part of the planning. You have to know the numbers. You have to know your financial. You have to, you know, and that's where I can come in as a financial advisor, coach, and a divorce coach, right? Is what do we have to look for? What do we have to do to get you prepared and understand the situation? I don't do legal. In this, Lori can do legal if you contract with her, right? Because then she can specifically talk, but well, in the state of Colorado and Florida. So
Right.
we always have to make that absolutely clear. It's just generalities, and you need to know and plan where you are in your situation. Okay. All right. So I hope we helped a little bit, Mary.
I like to just gain all this knowledge so that I can pull it out if I ever need it.
No, it's just good. It definitely is. And wishing you so much luck with this. And I hope you guys find the best resolution in the most peaceful way.
Yeah. Peaceful would be nice, right? I mean, we hear so many of the horror stories, and you know, emotionally, financially, it's just, I'm not sure it's worth it. So try to work together and collaborate is
You can. Yeah.
is the way
And
that-
knowledge helps, because a lot of times people fight things because they don't have the knowledge and the information, and they believe something that may not be accurate. And I mean, I talk about this in a different seminar that I do, that I've seen people fight over money they don't have. And that's not something you want to do, because you're spending money and emotional energy doing that. So gathering information, knowing the picture, for better or for worse, will so benefit you.
Well, wonderful. Mary, thank you for joining us today. And Bibi, who made a comment on Facebook. Every Tuesday we do live, and every Tuesday it's something a little bit different. So come and join us. Lori, again, it has been a pleasure having you on here. And yeah, we'll get together soon and talk about how else we can work together and